It all starts in the 80s, in the middle of the Iran-Iraq War. Iran, still recovering from the 1979 Islamic Revolution, was surprised by a series of Scud missile attacks fired by Saddam Hussein, Iraq. Iranian cities such as Tehran, Isfahan, and Tabriz became easy targets. Daily explosions, alert sirens, civilian population living underground to escape the bombing. Iran, until then without a serious missile program, was completely unprepared. With no time to lose, the Iranian regime decided that it would never be vulnerable again. The fastest way? By technology from those who were willing to sell. And here comes North Korea, an old known in the trading of weapons of destruction. In addition to her, China and Libya also provided equipment, parts, and engineers. The first Iranian missiles were born, Shahab-1 and Shahab-2, both derived directly from the Soviet Scud. An ancient, unrecordable system, but at least gave Iran the immediate response capacity. But these missiles were limited between 300 and 500 kilometers. They served to achieve regional targets, but not for Tehran's great goal, to have the ability to reach Israel. That's when Iran decided to invest heavily in increasing the range and destructive capacity of its weapons. The result was the Shahab-3, with a range of up to 2,000 kilometers. A gigantic leap that allowed to reach Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem without great difficulties. Soon after came the Ghadar 110, an improved version, with more accurate navigation systems and greater flight stability. The technological leap continued. Iran has developed Khorramshahr, also known as Raining, a missile capable of carrying almost 1,800 pounds of explosives and exceeding 2,000 kilometers. Besides him, Emad came into play. With more advanced guiding system, Emad gets an accuracy of up to 50 meters. In practice, this means that Iran already has missiles capable of reaching military and civilian targets with a high degree of precision within Israel or even on American bases in the region. But until that moment, Iran was still facing a very serious technical problem. All its missiles were liquid fuel. And what does that mean in practice? That each release required hours of preparation, supply of highly flammable fuel tanks, and absurd exposure to the risk of being detected and attacked before shooting. The process was slow, dangerous, and unusual for a modern war where minutes make all the difference. The Iranian answer to this problem came with the development of Sejal. Sejal was the first Iranian long-range ballistic missile with solid fuel. The difference is brutal. While a liquid fuel missile can take hours to get ready, Sejal can be released almost immediately after the shooting command. In addition, it is safer to transport and store, which means that Iran can hide these missiles in underground silos or even mobile trucks with no major risk of accidental explosion. The reach of Sejal? About 2,500 kilometers. This not only puts Israel within the radius of action, but also Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and of course the American military bases spread across the region. In terms of precision, Sejal is able to hit a target with an error margin of approximately 50 meters. In military language, this is considered a missile of high precision. The cost of each of these missiles varies greatly. Shahab-3, for example, costs around $3 million per unit. Ghadar 110 rises to about $5 million. Khorramshahr is between 6 and 8 million per missile. Sejal, with its solid fuel technology, is estimated at home from $8 to $10 million each. That is, it is not a cheap joke. Each release represents millions of dollars flying through the skies of the Middle East. And even with this very high cost, Iran has kept its production on a large scale. Just to get an idea of the size of the threat, in a recent attack, Iran has launched about 300 missiles and hundreds of explosive drones toward Israel in one night. The goal? Overload the Israeli air defenses and ensure that at least part of the projectiles would reach their targets. Many of these missiles were directed to densely populated areas like Tel Aviv, trying to cause maximum damage and panic among civilians. Israel's answer? A true shield of multicam defense. Most people know Iron Dome or Iron Dome, that system that intercepts short-range rockets and projectiles. But what few people know is that Iron Dome is not effective against ballistic missiles like those Iran fires. For this, Israel has other more robust systems. The first layer of defense against ballistic missiles is David's Sling, or Funded to David, a system designed to intercept medium-range threats, capable of reaching targets up to 300 kilometers away. Just above it comes Arrow, a more advanced system capable of toppling hypersonic and ballistic missiles at altitudes greater than 100 kilometers. And as a cake cherry, Israel also features THAAD, an American anti-missile defense system of very high performance, capable of intercepting projectiles outside the terrestrial atmosphere at altitudes that reach 150 kilometers. Each THAAD missile costs around $10 million. David's Sling and Arrow missiles are between $700,000 and $2 million per unit. The success rate of these systems? Something around 80%. For you to get an idea, military experts compare the task of intercepting a ballistic missile with the difficulty of hitting a bullet with another bullet, but at 30,000 feet in altitude and hypersonic speeds. Even so, Israel has been able to protect much from its territory, but with each new attack, the cost rises, defensive missile stocks fall, and tension increases. If on the one hand, Iran spends millions developing, producing, and firing its missiles, on the other, Israel is spending a true fortune trying to defend itself from each new attack. Let's talk about numbers for you to get a sense of the scale of this deadly game. Each missile of the Iron Dome system costs between $40 to $100,000 per firing. Seems cheap near others, but the problem is the amount. Israel even fires dozens, sometimes hundreds of intercepting missiles per night in response to massive rocket attacks and short-range drones. Now, when it comes to defense against ballistic missiles, the conversation changes level. The David's Sling? Each interceptor missile costs around $1 million. Arrow, depending on the version, can go out for up to $2 million to the unit. And if the situation requires the use of THAAD, the price of each shot can easily reach $10 million. That's right. Each THAAD missile released to overthrow a single enemy missile is equivalent to the price of an entire building in Tel Aviv. And guess what? Iran knows that. Therefore, one of the favorite tactics of Iranian Revolutionary Guard is precisely to overload the Israeli defense system with a flood of simultaneous targets. It's not just a matter of trying to go through the defenses, it's also a strategy of economic wear and tear. Each missile that Israel fires represents millions coming out of the public coffers. And here comes a very worrying part. The recent mass attack Iran has launched against Israel. We are talking about 300 ballistic missiles and hundreds of explosive drones launched at once. It was the largest coordinated attack ever recorded by Tehran against Israel. And the most shocking, even with all cutting-edge technology, Israel had difficulty intercepting everything. Imagine the scenario. Sirens playing in tens of cities, thousands of people running to shelters, interceptors being launched to the hills, the night sky lit by rocket tracks, and yet some missiles managed to pass the defenses. Several areas near Tel Aviv and northern Israel were damaged. It was not a catastrophe, but it was a clear warning. The system may be efficient, but it is not infallible. And Iran is learning from each attack. Iranian engineers analyze the data, study the behavior of Israeli defenses, and adapt their tactics. In the last offensive, Iran began to use missiles with irregular trajectories, changes in altitude and speed during the flight, precisely to make interception difficult. In addition, they are improving drone stealth technology and adding electronic countermeasures to try to confuse Israeli radars. The goal is simple: to make Israel make the calculations, shoot interceptors for nothing, and become vulnerable to the next attack. And in the meantime, the United States is increasingly involved in this story. Washington has provided extra air defense batteries to Israel, quick replacement of interceptors, and even ships with anti-missile systems to the region. Does the cost to maintain all this? Estimated in billions of dollars in recent months alone. Now, looking at the Iranian side, it is important to understand one thing. Their missile program is not just a military tool. He is also a political weapon. Each time Tehran displays his missiles at military stops or promotes testing videos, the message is clear: we're ready. If necessary, let's attack. And the message is not just for Israel. It is also to the neighboring Arab countries, the United States, and the whole world. Iran wants to show that, despite decades of economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and constant threats, it has managed to build an arsenal capable of changing the balance of power in the Middle East. But of course, all this attack capacity only makes sense if there is a target. And the preferred target is always the same: Israel. Therefore, Israeli strategists live on a state of alert. With each new Iranian missile test, the radars are more attentive. Interception simulations are updated. New civil protection bunkers are built, all to avoid the worst: a surprise attack on a large scale. Even rumors is that Israel already considers preventive attacks to destroy Iranian missile factories before the next handle is ready for use. But then we go into another dilemma. Any offensive action from Israel against Iran can trigger an open war with unpredictable consequences. And here comes the question that everyone asks: how far is it? What is the limit? How long do you miss this tension becoming a conflict of great proportions? There is still a lot for us to argue. Iran's next steps, the advances in Israel's defenses, and the real risk of a regional war. If the situation already seems serious, what goes ahead is even more worrying. Iran is not satisfied with the arsenal it already has. Quite the contrary. In recent years, the country has further accelerated the development of new missiles, focusing on three main points: higher range, greater accuracy, and greater explosive load capacity. One of the most commented projects in the international intelligence circles is the Khaibar Shikan missile, literally translating "castle breaker," a name that alone already makes the intention clear. This solid-fuel missile has a range of over 1,400 kilometers and a speed that reaches Mach 7, i.e. 7 times the speed of sound. In addition, it has maneuvering technology in the middle of the flight, making interception even more difficult. Another ongoing project is the development of maneuverable reentry vehicles, known as MARVs. Unlike traditional ballistic missiles, which follow a predictable trajectory, MARVs can change direction during the final phase of the flight, making it virtually impossible to predict exactly where they will fall. This requires air defenses to recalculate at all times, increasing the risk of interception failure. Meanwhile, Israel is also moving. Recently, the country has announced updates on the Arrow system, which now arrives at the Arrow 3 and Arrow 4 version. These new generations are designed specifically to deal with threats such as MARVs and even hypersonic missiles. In addition, Israel works in conjunction with the United States in the development of anti-Sisal laser systems, such as Iron Beam, which promises to significantly reduce the cost of interception. The concept is simple. Instead of spending millions per intercepting missile, Israel could use laser bundles to overthrow drones, rockets, and even ballistic missiles at certain phases of the flight. But Iron Beam is still in the testing phase, and, for now, Israel's defense depends on traditional and expensive systems. On the diplomatic side, the tension is also increasing. The United Nations, the European Union, and several Arab countries are pressuring that there is some kind of agreement that limits the Iranian missile program. But Iran so far refuses to accept any restrictions. Tehran considers his missiles an non-negotiable red line. They make it clear that giving up this arsenal would mean giving up the only real dissuasive tool they have against Israel and the US military bases in the Persian Gulf. And that's where the risk of a military climb is closer than ever. Israel, in turn, has already publicly stated that it will not passively accept that Iran reaches an offensive capacity capable of putting its existence at risk. The Israeli defense minister made it clear, if necessary, Israel will act preventively. And what would this preventive action be? In practical terms, we are talking about surgical bombings against missile factories, research centers, and even release bases in Iranian territory. Something similar to what Israel did in the 1980s in Iraq when he destroyed Osirak's nuclear reactor before Saddam Hussein could complete his atomic program. But attacking Iran would be much more complex. First, because the country is much greater territorially. Second, because Iran has already prepared for this possibility, spreading its strategic facilities in underground places and difficult to access. And third, because an attack on Tehran would certainly trigger a mass response not only from Iran, but also allied groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria. Translating, a preventive attack from Israel can easily become a regional war, with involvement from several countries and a domino effect that no one knows how it will end. Meanwhile, the civilian population on both sides lives in a constant state of uncertainty. In Israel, people have already gotten used to running for shelters to any siren sound. In Iran, State propaganda daily reinforces the idea of resistance and readiness for the confrontation. Fear, tension, and feeling that something big can happen at any time over the air. The fact is that behind the scenes, defense analysts, governments, and military worldwide follow each new test, every new movement, and each new speech of the leaders involved. The question that is in the air is simple but scary. Are we walking to an open war between Israel and Iran? Or will both sides continue to play this dangerous game of provocations, boundaries, and forced demonstrations? For now, the answer is one. The clock is running, and at any moment, a new missile can be fired.